When we last left off, Duel Links was coming to the end of its first year and its first era. Toon Barrel Dragon, a card recently released in the Yugi Unlock event, had taken over the meta, combining the powerful 3-star Demotion deck with Toons, creating a deck that could remove threats through card effect and attack directly with the right cards. Red-Eye Zombies was still a major threat, following closely behind Toon Barrel Dragon in terms of success rate, writing off their numerous consistency cards. Beyond these two, a couple of fringe decks known as Mausoleum Invader and Psychic were popping up here and there with successes, but neither were near the level of the previous two. We now continue our look back over the history of Konami's venture into the mobile market with Yu-Gi-Oh!, its ups and downs, and its intricate and ever-evolving metagame. This is the history of Duel Links. Generation Next would be the main box that officially launched the GX era, released on September 21st, 2017. While the GX World would not launch for another week, this set would be the mark of the beginning of the new era, as the power level of cards across the board with this set would set the standard for releases going forward. Starting with support for previous decks, Red-Eye Zombie would get another consistency boost thanks to Samurai Skull, which sends a zombie from deck to grave upon summon. It would also allow you to special summon Gozuki from your deck if it was removed by card effect, meaning your opponent standardly would have to remove it by battle. While not a consistency booster, Bacon Saver would also fit nicely into the deck thanks to its battle fading effect once per duel, which was easy to establish thanks to Samurai Skull and Gozuki. Ninja would see further support in Mass Ninja Ibizu, Armor Ninjutsu Art of Alchemy, and Ninjutsu Art Notebook, providing back row disruption, draw power, and searching for their Ninjutsu Art cards. As for new decks, 3 new decks would see their real start here. Horus the Black Flame Dragon would take the place of Silent Magician from the previous set as a spell immune level monster deck, seeing success thanks to level 6 having the same level of spell immunity as Silent Magician level 8, and level 8 stopping spells in general. Evil Dragon Ananta would see experimentation in its own deck, using the newly released worm monsters like Carteros, Lynx, and Barsis to provide its summoning conditions. Hazy Flame Beatdown would see far more success here, combining the previously released Hazy Flame Sphinx and Beast Rising with the newly released Flame Tiger and Canitar to form the backbone of a new beatdown strategy, providing consistent power boost to Hazy Flame Sphinx, which is untargetable, making it difficult to remove from the field. As for general support, Magical Something provided recursion for quick play spells like Enemy Controller. Card Guard provided one-time protection to any card on the field, which would occasionally pop up in decks focused around protecting a specific card. However, the card that truly began the new era of Duel Links was undoubtedly Floodgate Trap Hole, a trap card that could permanently flip any monster face down upon their summon. This would go on to see play in any deck running trap cards, as it was a one-card answer to any boss monster, being truly the first of its kind in terms of generic monster disruption. Generation Next would shake up the established meta heavily, bringing in the new era of GX, punctuated by the release of GX World 1 week later. Launched on September 28, 2017, GX World was the first new world added to Duel Links, bringing with it iconic characters from the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime, like Jaden Yuki, Chaz Princeton, Aster Phoenix, Bastion Misawa, and Alexis Rhodes. These 5 characters would also bring with them their own unique cards and skills, similar to past character releases. Jaden was focused around the original elemental hero monsters, like Avion, Burstinatrix, and Flame Wingman, but these would not be useful at all in the meta. Instead, his cards Wing Kuribo and Flute of the Summoning Kuribo would occasionally see play in stall-focused decks as a way to both deck thin and stall for a turn. Chaz Princeton was focused on the Ojama archetype, which would see experimentation thanks to their field lockdown abilities, but not much success overall. His skill, Ojama Go, on the other hand, would see success in stall decks as a way to clog up the opponent's board with Ojama tokens, but would be the only relevant piece of support to come from him. Aster Phoenix would come with his iconic Destiny heroes, like Malicious and Plasma, which would see success in the later GX era as more support was released. He would also bring 2 skills that would see success, in Bring It and Destiny Calling. Bring It was useful in that you could trade any card in your hand for a copy of Destiny Hero Plasma, allowing a player to tech the monster into a deck capable of flooding the board with monsters for its tribute requirement. Destiny Calling would put a copy of Dark City onto the field, allowing Destiny Hero monsters to effectively punch up to stronger monsters. Bastion Misawa would bring his chemical monsters, such as Hydrogeddon, Oxygeddon, Carboneddon, and Water Dragon. Of these, only Hydrogeddon would see play in the newer variant of Dinosaur decks thanks to its field swarming ability. His skills, however, would be 6 variations of the same ability, allowing the user to activate a copy of either Eureka, Molten Destruction, Gaia Power, Rising Air Current, Luminous Spark, or Mystic Plasma Zone for free when under 3,000 life points, based on which version you ran. Alexis Rhodes would be the most notable, and infamous, among all the new releases, as with her came her upgraded cards from the Arc 5 anime, the Cyber Angels. Cyber Angel is a ritual archetype, focused around tributing each other to ritual summon, then gaining some effect when summoned or tributed. These cards include Cyber Angel Dakini, Benton, Edatin, Machine Angel Ritual, Machine Angel Absolute Ritual, and Cyber Petite Angel, essentially forming a new deck from those cards alone. Dakini would be considered the go-to boss monster of the deck, removing a monster from the field on summon, inflicting piercing damage, and recycling a ritual monster or spell back into your hand at the end of the turn. This, combined with Benton's effect to search out a light fairy when tributed, Machine Angel Ritual's graveyard protection, and Cyber Petite Angel's searching ability, alongside all of the previously released ritual support, would propel Cyber Angel to Tier 0 status on release, completely overpowering everything that had come before it. In addition, simultaneously to this launch would be 2 new structure decks that would add further cards to the game. Released on the same day as GX World on September 28, 2017, being the 3rd and 4th Structure Deck releases, Structure Deck Legendary Warrior and Heroes Rising would bring new cards to the game as well. With Legendary Warriors, a majority of the cards were once again non-impactful to the overall meta, but 2 in particular would find usage later on. DD Warrior would be one of these, banishing any monster it battles with, along with itself. This would become useful in stall variants as a form of monster removal, stalling out a battle phase in the early game. The other card would be Assault Armor, which can make any warrior attack twice in a turn on the condition that it was the only monster you controlled when you equipped it. This might not seem powerful now, but would eventually become the linchpin in an OTK in the later GX era. The other deck released at the same time, Hero Rising, would introduce Elemental Hero Blazeman, who was unquestionably the most useful of the Elemental Hero cards released at the time, being able to search out Polymerization on summon and then copy the attribute, attack, and defense of any hero monster in your deck by sending it to the graveyard. While he wouldn't see competitive play until later, he did lay the groundwork for a viable Elemental Hero deck at GX's launch. While these 2 decks were not nearly as impactful as the character releases, the GX era was off to an explosive start, which would lead into the next mini-box 1 month later. Released on October 17, 2017, Servant of Kings was the first mini-box of the GX era. Following up Generation Next was always going to be tough, but Servant of Kings managed to do so successfully by introducing more generic cards to the game that could be used in almost any deck. The cover card, Dark Magician of Chaos, was unfortunately not one of these, but was still viable in its own right, allowing the user to retrieve any spell card from their graveyard at the end of the turn he summoned. While not generically splashable, he would see success later on in spellcaster-focused decks. Similarly, Maneater Bug, one of the classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Effect monsters, would be introduced here and find success in stall strategies, similar to DD Warrior, but wouldn't be played outside of them. Force Raider would once again set the bar for non-tribute normal monsters at 1900 attack, a value that would not be topped for some time. Moving into generic splashable cards, Forbidden Chalice would be introduced here, a quick play spell that could negate any monster's effect by increasing their attack by 400 that turn. Being versatile in both an effect negator and an attack boost in battle let Chalice see immediate play, being one of the most useful quick play spells in the game next to enemy controller. Similar splashability could be found in Wall of Disruption, a trap card that, upon an opponent's attack declaration, drops all of their attack monsters by 800 points for every monster on their field permanently. This would see similar play to Mirror Wall before it, being more useful in some cases as the attack cut was a fixed number between 800 and 2400, which in most cases could be more than the halving of Mirror Wall. The set would move to impact the meta, bringing new generic staples and continuing the pushes started with Generation Next. This wouldn't be the only push to the meta, as the next GX character was introduced just 1 week later. Beginning on October 25, 2017, Dr. Crowler's Tricky Tests would introduce Dr. Valen Crowler, the first GX event character. With him came a new control deck and his key archetype of Ancient Gears, a series of monsters that are immune to spell and trap cards while attacking. This was most prevalent in the 2 main cards, Ancient Gear Golem and Knight, the former of which could be considered the boss monster of the strategy, adding piercing damage onto the standard Ancient Gear effect. Golem would be fairly easy to summon with Crowler thanks to his skill Middle Age Mechs, which would start the game with a copy of Ancient Gear Castle on the field, building up counters as you summon monsters that could be used as tributes for Ancient Gear Golem. This archetype would be played alongside control staples up to this point like Sergeant Electro, Heavy Knight of the Flame, and Super Rush Headlong to control the board while building up your big finisher and Golem. This character seeing immediate meta success would set the standard for character releases in the GX era, having each character bring something of meta relevance, whether it be cards or skills. However, some of them were far overtuned at this point, which led the game into its first balance update of the GX era. Going into effect on November 6, 2017, the first balance patch of the GX era was the first ever list to introduce more than one card to the ban list. Out the gate, Machine Angel Ritual was limited to 1, which was an attempt to rein in the Tier 0 Cyber Angels which had been tearing through the meta with reckless abandon up to this point. Hitting this spell in particular was because Cyber Petite Angel could not search for Absolute Ritual, and this spell provided protection from the grave, which could be annoying to deal with in multiples. While this in no way killed the deck, it would bring Cyber Angel's power level down to a level where other decks could compete with it. Beyond this, Champion's Vigilance would also be limited to 1 as an answer to the steadily growing popularity of 3-star Demotion Dark Magician on the ladder, which had been rising as of late to counter the ever-present Cyber Angels on the ladder. Finally, Red Eye Spirit would be limited to 2 to prevent a perceived Red Eye Zombie takeover with Cyber Angels nerfed, which never came to be but was still a safe precaution to take. As for skills, Creator would be buffed to include a few more powerful cards in its pool, and Balance would be nerfed to no longer guaranteed the ratios used, as Handless Beatdown up to this point was abusing the skill to ensure they opened with only one monster in their opening hand. This balance update would be considered a success overall, leading into the next main box just one day later. Galactic Origin was the second main box of the GX era, released on November 7, 2017. This set would introduce Saphira, Queen of Dragons, which would allow you to either draw 2 and discard 1, discard a card from your opponent's hand, or return a light monster from grave to hand in the end phase where you either ritual summon it or send a light monster from hand or deck to grave. This one monster would be combined with Cyber Angel's natural tendency to make ritual monsters every turn, giving Cyber Angels another boost of consistency, which would see play from time to time, but it was debatable as to which was the better build, with or without Saphira. The other major deck to come from this set was Gladiator Beasts, making their Duel Links debut with the cards Lakari, Murmillo, Bestiari, Dimikari, Herculinos, Nerokios, and Esadari. The archetype's goal involved attacking with their monsters and then tagging out into another monster in the deck, activating that monster's effect on summon, generating advantage, and eventually contact fusing their boss monsters, which would be the first meta appearance of contact fusion. This archetype, while not extremely prevalent at launch, would become a meta mainstay over time, as more balance changes would push it up in the meta. Into the Void would see play in many OTK decks, as it provided a draw as long as you have at least 3 cards in hand after playing it, at the cost of discarding your entire hand at the end of the turn, which most OTK decks get around simply by killing the opponent before the end of the turn comes. Impenetrable Attack would see play in Gladiator Beast and Hazy Flame Beatdown decks as a way to protect your monster for a turn, triggering the Gladiator Beast tagout effect if used in response to a battle. However, the most important card from this set that would go on to shape the meta around it was Cosmic Cyclone, a quick play spell that, for 1000 life points, could banish any spell or trap on the field. This would be the first truly generic spell and trap removal option, not only providing spell and trap removal, but also a way to drop your life points in order to activate skills with a life point loss requirement. In the end, Galactic Origin would be a very successful set overall, giving a new variation to Cyber Angels, introducing a new meta deck in Gladiator Beasts, and giving the game its first generic spell and trap removal in Cosmic Cyclone. This would all culminate in the next KC Cup taking place just 2 days later. Beginning on November 9th, 2017, the second ever KC Cup would test the waters of the new balance update with a heavy competitive landscape. While many were expecting the absolute dominance of Cyber Angel and Red Eye Zombies going into this KC Cup, the results of the top 10 would show not only very little Red Eye Zombies, but instead the dominant force of the meta call that was Ninjas. Ninjas came out of nowhere to surprise many players, as the deck's boss monster Black Dragon Ninja was a direct counter to Dakini by banishing itself in response to Dakini's effect, letting the effect fail, then returning to the field immediately by its own conditions. This counterplay would let Ninja see a good portion of the top cut alongside Cyber Angel and Red Eye Zombie, the latter of which underperformed in the face of the surprise Ninja turnout. The November KC Cup would give good insights into the meta going forward, showing that the all-powerful Cyber Angel deck was compatible and that any deck could return to relevance with the right environment. This would be the meta environment for the next month, as the next mini-box wouldn't release until a month later. Blades of Spirits was the second mini-box of the GX era, released on December 1st, 2017. This set would introduce the 6 Samurai archetype to Duel Links, focusing around the boss monster Great Shogun Shin, who could special summon himself if you controlled at least 2 6 Samurai monsters. Shin's ability restricted the opponent to only being able to use 1 spell or trap per turn, which could be useful as long as the opponent's 1 spell or trap didn't out Shin, which would allow them to use more spell or traps. 6 Samurai's introduction in the set included the original 6 and Hand of the 6 Samurai, so the deck was not really at a competitive level yet, but could easily become relevant with the right support wave. Beyond this, other archetypes would receive 1 or 2 pieces of support here as well. Fire Kings received Barong, who could search any Fire King in the standby phase after he's destroyed by a card effect, giving further synergy to the Fire King Island and Yaksha. Gemini decks would gain a Beat Stick and Neosalius, but he wouldn't be used much until later support made him relevant. Hazy Flame Beatdown gained new tools in the form of Hazy Flame Cerberus and Hazy Glory, giving the deck more explosive summons and more untargetable beaters to use. Temple of the Mind's Eye would find a home in some variants of Stall, reducing or raising any damage dealt to either player to 1000. Parallel Twister would find tech spots in decks focused around field spell skills, providing an easy piece of spot removal for the cost of your field spell. Fire Formation Gyoko would see play as a counterpart to Jingzhen Hu and Sergeant Electro, being able to only target 1 spell or trap, but making it unable to activate in response. Finally, Powerful Rebirth provided decks based on lower level monsters a Grave Revival effect, the first of its kind since the Shallow Grave. Overall, Blades of Spirit didn't have any immediate impact on the meta proper, but would give some decks more powerful tools to work with, leading into the next 2 character unlock events. Beginning on December 19, 2017, Bonz's Spooky Zombie Party would introduce Bonz to Duel Links, and with him a couple of skills that would find homes rather quickly. Bonz would bring the skills Posthumous Army and Straight to the Grave to the game, the former being used as a way to lock certain type-restricted decks out of the graveyard by making them all zombies, and the latter being used in Red Eye Zombie as a reliable 200 attack bonus at all times. While Bonz's release only brought useful skills with him, the next character unlock event that took place 2 weeks later would bring yet another character to the game in Arkana. Duelist Chronicles, Battle City Begins, would begin on December 27, 2017, bringing Arkana, the Master of Dark Magician, to the game. What Bonz lacked in relevant cards, Arkana more than made up for, bringing Dark Magic Curtain, Magician's Rod, and Illusion Magic for Dark Magician strategies. More importantly than those, Arkana would bring Anti-Magic Arrows, a Duel Links exclusive card that would lock up all spell and traps at the start of the battle phase, making your attacks go through uninterrupted. He would also bring powerful skills in the form of a Trick Up the Sleeve and Show of Nightmares, the former guaranteeing a high-level spellcaster to start in your opening hand, while the latter would randomly add back a spell from grave to hand once per duel, as long as you had at least 3 spell cards in grave. Bonz and Arkana would both have their uses in the meta overall, whether it be through a generic spell or an ability in a meta deck, but both would help tide players over until the next main box less than 1 week later. Primal Burst was the third main box of the GX era, released on December 31, 2017. Once again, the set was focused around introducing new archetypes to the game to try and shake up the meta a bit, as we were still looking at a Cyber Angel-dominated meta at this point. Primal Burst would attempt to break it up firstly by introducing the Dark World archetype, focused around Snow, Unlight of the Dark World, and other monsters such as Ceruli and Rainbow, and spell and traps such as Dark World Lightning, Dark Smog, and the Forces of Darkness. This archetype's gimmick was to get their cards discarded by card effect to trigger effects in the graveyard, but were a bit underpowered on release due to their main TCG support cards not being imported at the same time. Volcanics would also see their start here in the form of Volcanic Doomfire, Rocket, and Shell, along with Blaze Accelerator, which could turn volcanic shells into monster removal, then replacing the shell immediately after with its effect. While the monster removal was useful, Doomfire was too cumbersome to get onto the board to see play, but the core of Volcanics would be considerably useful in the near future with different support cards. Lightsworn would see their first wave of support here, most prominently in Lila, Lightsworn Sorceress, and Jane, Lightsworn Paladin, but wouldn't be a standalone deck for some time, seeing splash play as options for other decks. Golden Ladybug would find an instant home in stall strategies, giving the decks an additional 500 life points a turn just for staying in your hand. Finally, the Bamboo Sword series of cards would be introduced here, including Broken, Cursed, and Golden Bamboo Sword. These cards would almost immediately see play alongside a previously released card named Woodland Sprite, forming the basis of Woodland Sprite FTK, a deck that used Woodland Sprite's effect to send equipped spells to the grave to burn the opponent for 500 each, alongside the Bamboo Sword package, giving plenty of equipped spells to fuel this effect while also drawing with Golden Bamboo Sword and triggering the effect of Cursed Bamboo Sword. Primal Burst would mainly set the stage for future releases, but the Woodland Sprite FTK would permeate the meta for some time after this set's release, leading us into the next set of balance changes. On January 9th, 2018, a new set of balance changes would go into effect for Duel Links, bringing both new cards to the ban list and a much needed skill rebalancing. For the ban list, Machine Angel Ritual would be moved from limited to semi-limited, but would be joined by Cyber Angel Dakini, effectively making Cyber Angel players only able to use 2 copies between the 2 cards, being the first effective implementation of this aspect of the Duel Links ban list. As for skills, 3-star Demotion would once again receive a nerf in its usage, only being activatable when under 1000 life points instead of paying 3000 to activate it, in addition to being once per duel. This change would effectively kill the deck's meta usage, as you now had to reach the 1000 threshold through other cards rather than the skill itself, making it difficult to play in any 7-star deck. The catch to this change was that Kazajin, Suijin, and Sangha of the Thunder could use the skill at any life total, making the originally intended use for the skill still possible for the Paradox Brothers Ace monsters. Restart would see an adjustment to show your opponent the hand you're sending back if you used it, giving away in most situations what deck you were playing. Finally, Mind Scan was changed to only be usable from the 3rd turn onward, as opposed to at any point in time, though the life point restriction remained. There was also a buff to middle-age mechs on this patch, activating Ancient Gear Castle at the start of the user's turn rather than the start of the game, so it couldn't be removed before your turn started. Overall, this balance update would be seen as another attempt to push Cyber Angels more in balance with the rest of the meta, essentially pushing the Saphira Cyber Angel variant to become the primary build of the deck. In addition to these changes, Konami would introduce a new way of delivering cards to players 3 days later in the form of the game's first ever selection box. Selection Box Volume 1 would release on January 12, 2018, bringing the game's first ever set of reprints. Up to this point, Duel Links had 9 main boxes and 8 mini boxes, making the barrier to entry for new players a bit high, as they would need to go into multiple boxes just to gather meta staples to play at a top tier setting. To help alleviate this barrier to entry, Konami introduced the Selection Boxes, a series of boxes that would take the best cards from the previous year of the game and put them into one easily accessible set, making it easier to get older cards that were seeing play. This first collection would include cards like Sphere Karibo, Sonic Bird, Senju of the Thousand Hands, Reinforced Human Psychic Board, Gozuki, Mecha Phantom Beast Hamstrat, Sergeant Electro, Destructotron, Red Eye Zombie Dragon, Ninja Grandmaster Sasuke, Soul Exchange, Order to Charge, Double Summon, Super Rush Headlong, Mirror Wall, Divine Wrath, Ninjutsu Art of Transformation, Xingzhen Hu, and Wild Tornado, to name a handful. In addition, the selection box would introduce new exclusive cards to it as an incentive for older players to still buy into the set. The only card among these that would see any kind of relevant play would be Dark World Dealings, giving the previously mentioned Dark World deck a reliable way to discard their monsters. While the set may just seem like a good thing overall, it did come with the catch that it was a time-exclusive set, only becoming available at certain parts of the year, effectively making it so that players that missed it would not have access to the exclusive cards inside. This issue would become more apparent in the future, but for now it was excusable as the exclusive cards really didn't do that much to the meta. The same could not be said for what followed 2 weeks later, as Konami had made a glaring mistake in their ban list from earlier this month. Effective January 24, 2018, just over 2 weeks after the last ban list, an emergency ban list was put in place, limiting the monster Woodland Sprite. This was done in response to the growing presence of the Woodland Sprite FTK, which saw a major spike in play after the last ban list completely missed it, causing the ranked ladder to be filled with a solitaire deck. Limiting Woodland Sprite would slow the deck down considerably, but it wouldn't kill it overall. Konami mentioned in this post about the ban list that they would also be watching the Bamboo Sword cards very closely, as if the deck continued, they would take further action on those cards as well. This would be followed through, as just under 2 weeks later, on February 5th, 2018, Golden Bamboo Sword would also be emergency limited to match Woodland Sprite, completely killing the FTK. The set of changes would establish that Konami did not want any form of a consistent OTK or FTK in Duel Links, and would not hesitate to hit problem cards when presented. In addition to these changes, the initial emergency hit would come just 1 day before the release of the next set. Resonance of Contrast was the third mini-box of the GX era, released on January 25th, 2018. The set would attempt to give the original Red Eyes Black Dragon a push into the meta with the release of Red Eyes Slash Dragon, a fusion monster requiring the original and any warrior. Whenever it attacked, Slash Dragon could equip any warrior from the graveyard to it as an equip spell, and it could send any card equipped to it to the graveyard to negate any targeting effect from the opponent. This unique effect would allow the card to see moderate success out the gate, but it wouldn't be a mainstay in the presence of Cyber Angels or Red-Eye Zombie. The Bujin archetype would get its start here with Bujin, Yamato, and Arasuda, but wouldn't see further play until support was released. Vampire Grace was the first piece of vampire support since Crimson Kingdom, but wouldn't see play until further support released. In the end, the only card that would see major meta success was Snipe Hunter, a monster that could discard a card from your hand to have a 2/3 chance to destroy any card on the field. This would see splash play in various decks, but its most prominent usage would be alongside the Volcanic engine from Primal Burst, providing a discard engine through copies of Volcanic Shell to fuel Snipe Hunter's effect. Overall, Resonance of Contrast was considered more as a preview of things to come, but would bring Snipe Hunter into the meta, giving one last shakeup before the KC Cup 2 weeks later. The third KC Cup began on February 8th, 2018. While the KC Cup was nothing new at this point, this particular KC Cup would be more interesting to the prior two, as this one gave any player that ended in the top 600 of their region a free pass into Stage 2 of the World Championship qualifier later that year. Because of this, the competition of this particular KC Cup would see a sharp rise compared to the past, as there was now a tangible reward for doing well. With that said, the dominant deck was Saphira Cyber Angel, the newest evolution of the Cyber Angel deck since its hit in January. Saphira, once used as a tech option, was now a core piece of the deck, providing a consistent body that also provided its other effects every turn thanks to Cyber Angel's knack for ritual summoning fast and often. Following closely behind would be Red-Eye Zombie, as the deck had seen a couple of new additions with time thanks to Zombie Skull and Bacon Saver, giving the deck more consistency in its already consistent game plan. Among the other top decks of the tournament, such as Gladiator Beasts, Dinosaur, Hazy Flame, and Stall, the surprise success of the KC Cup would be Magnet Warriors, which would take first place in the world. This deck used Delta the Magnet Warrior in combination with cards like Beta the Electromagnetic Warrior and Powerful Rebirth to quickly fill up the grave with Magnet Warrior monsters, fueling both the effect of Delta to summon Valkyrion and to summon Gaia Plate the Earth Giant. In addition to this, the deck used Storm to clear out used copies of Powerful Rebirth and to clear opponents' back row, making an open field for Gaia and Valkyrion to attack for game. This breakout success would have been enough to establish Magnet Warriors as a mainstay of the meta. However, a couple of new releases over the next week would once again change what decks were on top of the meta. Starting on February 13th, 2018, Mokuba Kaiba would be unlockable via a new set of bingo missions, a set of challenges for a player to receive rewards from. This was the first, and so far only character not to be tied with a world release or a time-sensitive event, making Mokuba Kaiba a bit of an anomaly in the character roster. Card-wise, Mokuba brought Ancient Rules, a spell card that could special summon any level 5 or higher normal monster from your hand, and Dark Flare Dragon, a 2400 attack dragon that could special summon itself by banishing a light and a dark from your graveyard. While these two cards were notable, the most important thing that Mokuba brought with him was his skill Kaiba Court Bling. At the time, this skill could be used when you lost 1800 life points to search for any one prismatic or glossy rarity card in your deck at random, making card rarity an impactful piece of deck building. However, this would not see play until much later, as for an additional 200, you could use Yami Yugi's skill Destiny Draw, which let you choose what card to add on top of searching for any card in your deck. The effects of Mokuba's launch wouldn't be felt until much later, but it did give players a good transition point into the complete meta overhaul that followed. Abyss Encounters was the fourth main box of the GX era, released on February 20th, 2018. The set would completely reshape the meta around it by introducing support for 3 deck types that would go on to be the face of the new meta, being Archfiend, Alien, and Sea Stealth Attack. Of the 3, the least impactful of these would be Archfiend, a deck centered around the newly released boss monster Archfiend Emperor, the First Lord of Horror. The deck focused around using lower level Fiend monsters, like Trance Archfiend and Doomdog Otheros, to quickly get your larger Archfiend monsters into the graveyard with the skill Fiend Farewell, and then bring them back with the new trap card Call of the Archfiend, which could revive a higher level Fiend once per turn as a continuous trap. Sea Stealth Attack would be another powerhouse deck to come from this set, centered around the titular card, which in combination with Umi would give spell and trap protection and monster removal for your higher level water monsters. This was done in combination with the skill Mythic Depths and the monster card Citadel Whale, which could special summon itself by tributing 2 water monsters, searching for Sea Stealth Attack on summon, and giving your water monsters once per turn targeting negation. Other monsters commonly played in the deck from this set would be Abyss Soldier for targeted bouncing, Warrior of Atlantis for a 2100 body under Umi and a searcher for the tech card A Legendary Ocean, Gishki Chain as a 2000 attack body under Umi that could stack the top 3 cards of your deck, Gishki Beast as a 1-card Citadel Whale when played with the other Gishki monsters, and Fishborg Planter as an additional body to summon Citadel Whale. The final, and arguably most impactful of the new decks from the set, would be Aliens, a deck focused around spreading 8 counters, which could be used to lower an opponent's monster's attack and defense by 300 for each when battling an alien, or to activate their various effects. Alien Overlord would be considered the boss monster of the deck, which could special summon itself by removing 2 A counters from the field and place one on an opponent's monster once per turn. Alongside this would be Alien Telepath, which could remove A counters from an opponent's monster to destroy a spell or trap, Warrior, which placed 2 A counters on anything that destroyed it in battle, and Gray, which placed an A counter when flipped and drew a card when destroyed. Their monsters, however, were nothing compared to the main 2 spell and trap cards used to push the deck into top tier status, being A-Cell Recombination Device and Brainwashing Beam. Recombination Device would let you send an alien from deck to grave to place A counters on your opponent's monster equal to the level of the sent monster, then banished itself from grave the next turn to add an alien monster from deck to hand, providing quick A counter distribution and searching in a single card. Brainwashing Beam proved to be a huge payoff for spreading A counters, taking control of an opponent's monster that had A counters on it, removing 1 on each of your turns, and keeping it as long as it still had A counters on it. Abyss Encounters completely changed up the meta with its release, rivaling the power level of the meta mainstays up to this point and even eclipsing them in parts. This meta-defining set would be followed up by arguably the best structure deck up to this point just 1 week later. Destiny Rulers was the 5th structure deck, released on February 28, 2018. Compared to the previous structure decks, Destiny Rulers was noteworthy as it introduced a slew of new archetypal support for the Destiny heroes released with Aster Phoenix. This includes Destiny Hero Celestial, who could banish itself and another Destiny hero from grave to draw 2, Drill Dark, who could special summon another Destiny hero from hand when summoned, Dark Angel, who could both clog the opponent's board and disable their spells, Dreamer, who provided battle protection from the graveyard, and Dangerous, who can send Destiny heroes from deck to grave once per turn. In addition to the Destiny heroes, this structure deck would also introduce the Vision Hero archetype with Vision Hero Vion and Vision Hero Trinity. Trinity was the highest attack hero monster when summoned with 5,000 attack and could attack 3 times in a turn, but couldn't attack directly, while Vion could send a hero monster from deck to grave on summon, then banish a hero from grave to search for polymerization. While these were all not immediately impactful, they were leaps and bounds better than any of the structure decks that had come before it, and would greatly affect the meta with future releases. As for the current meta, it would once again see a shakeup in the form of a new set released just 2 weeks later. Rampage of the Forest was the 4th mini-box of the GX era, released on March 14, 2018. This set would introduce the Sylvan archetype to Duel Links, a set of plant monsters revolving around excavating them from the top of your deck to activate different effects. Each of the Sylvan monsters had an effect to excavate a number of cards from the top of your deck and sent the plants among them to the graveyard, but each also had a unique effect when sent to the grave this way. Sylvan Kumashrumo would destroy a spell or trap, Martial Leaf would destroy a monster, Hermitry would let you rearrange the top 3 cards of your deck in any order, letting you set up your next excavate play, and Guardioak would take any plant from the grave and put it on top of the deck, letting you excavate it for another effect proc. In addition to this, the deck played World Carrot Weight Champion from the set, which could special summon itself from the grave by sending a plant from hand or field to grave, as well as Rose Lover, a card trader card that could banish itself from grave to summon any plant monster from your hand. As impactful as Sylvans were on release, becoming meta staple almost immediately, one other card from this set would gain notoriety quickly. Haze Grenade was a spell card that, when played, would return all set spell and traps back to the hand. This was considered immensely powerful immediately, allowing a player to remove all of an opponent's back row options instantly to make their initial play. While not popular out the gate, Grenade would see play for the foreseeable future in any deck that needed to set up through back row, making it one of the most notable, and eventually infamous, cards of the GX era. The set would be meta-defining to the game as a whole for multiple reasons, both short-term and long-term, leading into the next GX character unlock event. Beginning on March 28, 2018, Awaken Rainbow Dragon brought Jesse Anderson to the game, and with him, his series of Crystal Beast monsters. This series of monsters was all about becoming continuous spells on destruction, then using them from that state to activate other effects. While not impactful to the meta as a whole, Crystal Beast would see play later on as an engine for other decks in a rogue setting. As for Jesse Anderson's explosive skills, Crystal Power was the only one of note here, once per turn boosting all of your monsters by 200 for each continuous spell on your field. This would see eventual play in decks focused around continuous spells, but not for some time. This event, alongside the structure deck Draconic Knights, which released 3 days later, would both be seen as failures in the short term, as neither impacted the meta in the slightest at the time. However, the meta shakeup was coming, as 3 days after Draconic Knights, the next main box would release, and it would come with the new powerhouses of the meta.